episode of JRC TV. This week we are talking to my brother from another mother. No, we're not related, even though we have a common, I don't know if it's a surname, family name. Yeah. But I do want to introduce you to Mike Robbins. I got an email from him from a friend, and it was really funny because I was trying to figure out where Mike was in our family tree, even though he's an author and a speaker, and I was like, shit, you fit right in, man. So welcome, Mike, and I'll give him a proper introduction and then ask him to give you a little bit about himself. Let's see here. So Mike Robbins is the author of 3 books so far. Focus on the good stuff, Be Yourself, Everyone Else is Already Taken, and his latest book, which is Nothing Changes Until You Do. He's a sought-after speaker who delivers keynotes and seminars to groups of all kinds. Some of his clients include Google, Wells Fargo, eBay, Schwab, Gap, and the San Francisco Giants. Very fun. He and his work have been featured in Forbes and the Wall Street Journal, as well as on ABC News, the Oprah Radio Network. Since 2008, he's been a regular contributor to Huffington Post. His books have been translated into 14 different languages. And today, we get to visit with him and learn more about what he's up to, and hopefully really dig in on some concepts that can help you right now. Also, we're going to learn a little bit of his new book. So, welcome, Mike. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jairek. Yeah, it's nice to connect. I know we chatted about this on the phone and you alluded to it, but I often get asked if I'm part of your family, and I have to say, unfortunately, no, but nice that we do have the same surname, and I'm glad to be here talking to you and everybody who's watching us.
Very cool. Well, welcome. I give your official bio, but give people a little bit about your personal background. I know there's some fun twists and turns in there that people find pretty interesting. So if you would, who are you?
Absolutely. Well, that's a big question, but I'll give sort of the Cliff Notes version of my life. I grew up here in the San Francisco Bay Area where I still live, and I played baseball most of my life. I actually got drafted right out of high school by the Yankees. I didn't end up signing with the Yankees because I got an opportunity to play baseball at Stanford, so I went to Stanford, played there. Then I got drafted by the Kansas City Royals, signed a pro contract when I was 21. And the way it works in baseball, you sign with a major league team, you have to go into the minor leagues and then still work your way up. And unfortunately, my 3rd season in the minors with Kansas City, I was a pitcher. I went out to pitch one night, and I threw one pitch toward ligaments in my elbow, blew my arm out. So that was the end of it didn't end like that day, but I got hurt, and over the next couple years with a bunch of surgeries, by the time I was 25, my baseball career was done, even though I'd started when I was 7. So I had to, reinvent myself. I had to figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And after a couple years in the dot-com world in the 90s, I started my own speaking and coaching business back in 2001. And for the last 13 and a half years, I've been traveling around the country and speaking to lots of groups, some of whom you mentioned, and talking a lot about appreciation and authenticity and many other things that are important to me. So that's a little bit of, kind of my story and what brought me here today.
A little bit of the background.
Yeah.
And those changes for most people are something that you can't see coming, you never know are headed your way, and then one day they nail you, and you don't know what to do. And I know one thing you were mentioning was just the concept overall of vulnerability.
Yes.
And how do you stay vulnerable in those times? Because it's so easy to, if you're chasing something from 7 years old and you're going and going and going, and the dream comes true, which is insane. Because for most people, that's like, oh my God, I never had the dream come true. But when you have it come true, and then it's almost slides away.
Yeah.
And it's easy to shut off. It's easy to get pissed at people. It's easy to be upset at yourself or somebody or life.
Yeah.
How do you stay open and vulnerable in moments like that?
Well, I think it's a process for all of us. I mean, for me, my journey with baseball and when that ended, it was difficult. It was painful. Physically, it was painful. Emotionally, mentally, it was painful for sure. But, I can say now, I'm 40 years old now, so it's been more than 15 years since baseball ended. And looking back on it, absolutely I can see it was one of the greatest blessings that ever happened to me. I learned so much. It really brought me to my knees in a lot of ways, and I had to look much more deeply within myself. And it's not that we have to create tragedy or loss or difficulty or challenge in order to learn and grow, but those things tend to show up in life anyway. And one of the things, I love the saying, don't waste a good crisis, that I think when we're going through something difficult, use it to our advantage, use it for an opportunity to grow and to learn. And that doesn't necessarily make it easier in the moment. And a lot of times we figure out the synchronicity of it all and why it all makes sense when we look backwards. The challenge is being able to stay open in the midst of it. Years ago, a mentor of mine said to me, hey, Mike, if you change the word to the word for in the phrase, why is this happening to me? And then it becomes, why is this happening for me? Then everything that shows up in your life, even the challenges, even the painful stuff, becomes an opportunity for you to grow and learn. And I try as best I can to, live that way in my own life. And my experience with my baseball career ending was a difficult one, but a very, very important one and pivotal in my own life.
Very cool. And it makes so much sense. I've heard it said, life happens for me, not to me.
Right.
And it's one thing to say that.
Yes.
But it's a whole other thing to feel that way when it's going on.
Yeah.
So for someone watching this, just a random crazy question.
Right.
How did you get yourself to remember to feel that way when all hell breaks loose? Like, is it just saying it over and over again? Is it sticking it on a poster board in front of your face and being like, okay? What brings that into your body so you actually feel that way, not just try to convince yourself to think it?
Right. I mean, I think that's a great question. I think for each of us it's a little different. For me at that time in my life and even now, having people around me who can coach me, who can support me, putting myself into, you talk about vulnerability, it's like I'm someone who likes to verbally and emotionally process things, as many of us do, but being able to, just earlier today I had a phone call with my own coach so that I can, what's going on, how am I feeling right now, not just to talk about it, but to actually feel it, express it, move through it, right? That's an important thing for all of us to do because life is fluid, life is changing all the time, things are happening, and what we got to be able to do is figure out for ourselves what's a practice that allows us to bring ourselves into the present moment. And that's what a physical experience does. It brings us into the present moment, and we can't be stuck in some story about what happened and woe is me. And I made a decision many years ago around my baseball career, Jairek, and I decided I didn't want to be 50 or 60 years old sitting at the end of a bar drinking a beer talking about, I used to be somebody, I could have been somebody, it didn't work out for me. And I saw that as a possibility. I could have gone that path, and I thought, you know what? That's not going to be me. Am I disappointed that this happened? Absolutely. Do I like that it happened? No, it wasn't what I planned, but it's what showed up. So can I use it in some way to my advantage, even though at the time I didn't know exactly what that was going to mean?
Nice. I love it. And I love what you said there. How can I use what showed up for my advantage to help catapult me into the next place?
Absolutely.
Which so many people get stuck in those moments. The other thing you pointed out, which is beautiful, and I've had a handful of corporate clients show up in my world where I was scratching my head because these guys make more money than me, they've got bigger careers than me, they've got bigger titles than me, and I was like, what in the world are you calling me for?
Right.
And I started laughing, and they called me because they needed that sounding board. They needed that person they could talk with and be vulnerable with that wasn't judging them, that wasn't trying to position and learn how to knock them out of the spot so they could get their next job. There's someone that just honestly cared, was willing to give them feedback, was willing to listen, and was willing to connect with them on it, and help them figure out what to do with it.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. So that vulnerable piece, for people listening to this who are in the corporate world, who are in the big business world, it's such an important piece to find that person you can connect with, usually who's outside of your normal circle, only because your normal circle, they're hunting for you in some way, shape, or form.
For sure. And the thing about, I love that example because a lot of times, look, when someone calls you or calls me or any of us in life, regardless of what we do, whether we're coach people or whatever the work that we do, a lot of times there's the question in our mind, no matter how successful we might be, no matter how confident we might be, there's that moment of, can I do this, or why are they asking me? Or it's, in psychology we call it the imposter syndrome, right? I write a bit about this in my new book. It's like feeling like, how did I get here? And almost every person I've ever met, regardless of their level of success, and a lot of times even the most uber successful people deal with the imposter syndrome the most intensely. Because there's this sense, again, our external, here's how I project myself to the world, and then what's really going on. And what's important for us to remember for us personally, but also as we interact with each other, it's getting down, as I like to say, below the waterline of the iceberg, getting down to what's real and what's going on. Professional credibility is often about our resume or our experience or our client list or our track record or our, the bottom line of our business. And it's not that that's not important, but personal credibility is about our ability to show up and actually be present in the moment. So someone who calls you on the phone and wants that feedback isn't necessarily doing it because, hey, you've got 20 years or 30 years of experience and you can. They're doing it because there's a certain amount of personal credibility that you have, that they feel safe, they feel like they can trust you, and that's something that we all need. And so I'm a big advocate, as I know you are, of people getting coaches and supporters and advocates in their lives who they can be real with. In those moments where you can take the mask off and say, this is what's really going on. This is how I'm really feeling. Even those of us who are focused on empowerment and personal growth like you and I are, there are times when, again, I know what the right answer is. I speak it on stage, but I have my moments where I'm human and I go, what the hell is going on? Like, I'm stuck. I need to have someone help me get unstuck, and one of the ways to do that is to tell the truth.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of coaches that watch this. So I'm sure they're tapping in and they're remembering this. And hopefully, just like you said, you coach people, you speak, and you also have a coach. I have a coach as well.
Yeah.
So those people who are watching this in that arena in coaching personal development, hopefully you're getting the message, get a coach.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in saying that and listening to what you're saying, there's a lot of truth in this, a lot of potency in this. The other question is, what inspired you? This is your third book, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
So most people, they have a book in them, maybe two. But what inspired you to go for three? Like, what brought this back to the table, and what is this message, and how is it different from the others, and what is it bringing to the world that people can expect?
Right. Well, my first book came out in '07, Focus on the Good Stuff. My second book, Be Yourself, Everyone Else is Already Taken, came out in '09. So it's actually been a 5-year gap between book 2 and book 3 for me. And this new one, Nothing Changes Until You Do, it's a very personal book. I actually wrote it, Jairek, in a bit of a different way. It's 40 short essays, short chapters. My mentor was a wonderful man named Richard Carlson, who wrote the book Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, and it's all small stuff. Now, Richard passed away back in 2006. Actually, he had just written the foreword for Focus on the Good Stuff, my first book at the time. And he inspired me in so many ways in his life and with his work. And all these years later, I actually felt I had a dream that I was supposed to write a book that was short essay format. And that always seemed like an easy way and a fun way to write a book, but at the same time, it always felt like that was kind of Richard's style, and it almost felt a little bit like I didn't want to try to imitate that. And I didn't necessarily. I did it in my own way. But what I decided to share in this book was a lot of stories and examples and experiences from my own life, some challenges, some things that have been difficult for me, and also a lot of experience that I've learned over the last 13 or so years as I've been traveling around and talking to people. And the common denominator in this book is really about how do we improve and enhance the relationship we have with ourselves. Because here's the thing that I believe about most of the things that we do in life. Most of the things we do, even the big stuff, even the stuff that seems most difficult on the surface, is actually relatively easy, or at least easier than dealing with ourselves in relation to those things. Right? Back when I was playing baseball all those years in college and professionally, like, pitching is challenging enough. You take some skill and you got to be good. But the hardest part was dealing with my own head and my own heart. Parenting now, I've got 2 girls who are 8 and 5. It's not the easiest thing I've ever done. It poses some challenges, but the hardest part of parenting is me. Is when I'm being a jerk, or I got my head up my you-know-what, or I'm not paying attention to my girls, or I'm getting irritated by little, then it becomes difficult. So this book is really about how do we make peace with ourselves, have compassion for ourselves, accept ourselves, and when we do that, it actually gives us the freedom to be way more effective in whatever it is we're doing.
Yep, I love that. And just to harp on that a little bit, question, when you talk about people being hard on yourself and having compassion for yourself,
yes,
and these concepts of like self-love and loving yourself versus challenging yourself and pushing yourself,
yes,
my question is, I grew up in a place where high standards was a very important thing. So hold yourself to the highest standard.
Yes.
At the same time, love yourself, forgive yourself, be there for yourself, support yourself. How do these two concepts mix together?
Well, I think that it's interesting. I'm glad you asked that question, Jairek. I mean, you were probably, trained and mentored by one of the masters of this, and I think the way I describe it now, and there's this whole world, this idea called growth mindset, right? And what growth mindset essentially is high standards, high expectations, simultaneously high nurturance. So what that means is, can we hold ourselves and other people? I talk about this in the corporate world when I'm talking to teams. I was just giving a speech last night about this. Like, how do you really create extraordinary results is you have a high standard, a high expectation, a high bar for yourself, for others, yet at the same time, a high level of nurturance. And the nurturance comes in compassion, forgiveness, acceptance, appreciation, those kind of things, which can sometimes seem soft. We have to simultaneously have both of those going, because if we're just simply holding a high standard all the time, what happens is it turns into perfectionism, and it's never good enough, and we're just hard driving, and we may achieve some success, but there's no sense of fulfillment, and it's also a very miserable process to get there. If all we do is focus on the nurturance piece, a lot of times then we end up holding ourselves back, sort of playing small, because we're not really going for it, we're not really challenging ourselves. So we want to do both at the same time, and most of us have a tendency, either personality-wise or in any given moment, to kind of be on one side or the other of that spectrum, and what we want to do is bring them both together.
Gotcha. So it's a mix between that emotion and logic side, where the logical point of there's numbers and digits, and either hit the goal or you didn't.
Right.
And then there's the emotional side of I'm going to support every process and every piece of progress to make sure my body gets addicted to moving forward.
Yes. And I think what happens for us in life, and particularly around numbers and results, they're important, but I always like to say, I use this as an example because of my baseball background, the numbers are just the scoreboard. They're not the game. They just reflect what's happening on the field, right? When I was pitching in a baseball game, the scoreboard was just up there. It was just telling the score. It was telling the story of what was happening. And if we were playing well, the numbers looked good. If we weren't playing well, the numbers looked bad. But I think what happens a lot of times for us, and this sometimes happens to me, we get obsessed with the numbers and the results, and we forget that we got to really focus on the game. And not just playing the game well to win, but actually asking ourselves a very simple but important question is, am I actually enjoying the game? Am I liking what I'm doing? Because that really matters. And if not, we can change. We can adjust. We don't have to keep playing the same game over and over again, even and especially if we're good at it. It's a constant evolutionary process, and I think that's an important piece for us on our path of growth and success.
Absolutely. Enjoying it and knowing you gave your all. I think it was John Wooden, if I remember correctly. He said, at the end of the game, I don't care what the scoreboard says, if you look yourself in the face and you gave your all, everything you had,
yes,
you won the game, regardless of what that board says. I don't care if it says won or loss. If you gave your all, you won. Now,
absolutely,
at the end of the game, even if it says you won and you didn't give your all,
yes,
you lost, because you'll always have that feeling of I could have given an extra ounce.
Absolutely. One of the worst experiences as a pitcher in baseball is giving up a home run, right? That's like the worst, and especially you give up a home run on the road in the other team's ballpark, right? The guy hits a home run, the crowd's going nuts, they're all excited, and you just failed in front of everybody, right? It's a pretty horrible feeling. But over the years, I gave up a bunch of home runs when I was pitching. I never liked giving up home runs. But there was a difference. If I made a really good pitch and I was really aggressive, and the guy just, he just went down and got it and put a good swing on it, and he hit the ball 450 feet, it's like you tip your cap, you say, hey, man, you beat me. And there was something about it, even though the competitive part of me didn't like it, I didn't want to give up those runs, I didn't want to lose the game, I could live with that. When I was scared, when I was down 3-1 in the count and I was nervous and thought I was going to walk him and I kind of threw it right over the plate hoping he didn't hit it, and then he hit a home run, that felt terrible because it was that element of I gave in. And I could tell the difference, and so it's not just if we only focus on the result, the end result, a lot of times we miss out. And sometimes failing, as much as we all hate to fail, is an incredible teacher and an incredible opportunity for us to learn and to grow. So again, back to what we were talking about earlier, why is it happening for me? If I'm having some lack of success in a particular area, instead of judging myself really harshly, which is what we tend to do, we can start asking some deeper questions. What's this feedback? What's this result telling me? Where can I change? And use that as helpful feedback.
Very smart. Very smart. I agree with that, and I love that. Final question, in bringing this together, and then we'll talk more about the actual book and what people can expect from it, but the topic of surrender. Yeah. And I know there's that piece of what happens for me or to me. There's moments of vulnerability where you just have to be open. Yes. But what does this piece of surrender really mean to you?
Well, surrendering is an interesting one because I think on the one hand it can seem like, I know it does to me initially, oh, surrender, that seems bad, that seems weak, that seems like passive, I don't want to surrender. But there's a real important part. It's kind of like the sense of sort of zen in like just being with being with what's real. One of my favorite quotes is from Byron Katie. She says, when you argue with reality, you lose, but only 100% of the time. So surrendering is about really allowing things to be as they are. It doesn't mean we don't want things to change, but here's the paradox of change. If we're unwilling to accept the way that things are, we can't change, right? We're constantly, it's like Carl Jung said, what you resist persists. The more we push against it, the more we fight against it. And look, this is counterintuitive for a lot of us, particularly those of us like me who are kind of type A and focused and want to get after it and want to change things that need to be changed. It's like there's a part where we first have to surrender to, allow things to be as they are. One of the greatest lessons I've learned in surrendering, Jairek, has been as a father. My girls are 8 and 5 now, but especially like when they were toddlers, and they would throw temper tantrums, and it was like the most excruciating thing in the grocery store. I got a 2-year-old screaming on the floor. It's like I learned a lot about surrender in those moments because if I tried to intervene really fast and like, stop doing that, or what are you doing, or it would get worse. So there was an element of, could I just be with, wow, my 2-year-old is freaking out and I don't like it, but the reality is, the bigger issue was me worrying that all the people at the grocery store were thinking I was a terrible father. But if I could surrender to the moment, a lot of times my daughters would actually calm down because emotionally I could calm down and let it be. And I thought that was such a great metaphor for life, because there are times things are happening that I don't like or we don't like, and our reaction to the thing that we don't like actually perpetuates it and makes it worse. But when we surrender, there's something that lets go, and then we can actually from that place make a choice for something different, and change can happen.
Yeah, I love that. Absolutely love that, and 100% agree. Very cool. So I realize probably most of this is in the book, or some of it's in the book, but tell us, give us some details on the book specifically, like chapter by chapter or a brief outline. What's in there? What do they expect? I know it's a handful of short essays, different pieces of life, but if someone were to pick up this book, what's it going to do for them?
Well, there's three main things. I mean, there are 40 short essays. They're all kind of different themes around this whole concept. The main concept of the book is around self-compassion. How do we make peace with ourselves? How do we really enhance and improve and make the relationship with ourselves as healthy as possible? The second aspect is about surrendering and really accepting life as it is. Not, again, I'll be happy when I lose the weight, when I make the money, when I fall in love, when my business gets to that level. I mean, nothing wrong with wanting that success, but can we actually be where we are and be okay with where we are? And the third thing has to do with really taking ownership of our lives, right? I mean, the title, Nothing Changes Until You Do. So what is it that you want? How do you shift over here first so that then everything shifts? Because if you're trying to, as we all do erroneously, fix and change everything around us and everyone around us, that's actually not what really leads us to change. So how do we do that inner work? It's an ongoing process, but how do we do that inner work so that our life can change in the way that we want it to? Very cool. I dig it. You're a very conscious athlete. Thank you. I appreciate that. So if they want to grab a copy of the book, my suggestion is always grab two, one for yourself, one for a friend. Where do they go? How do they get it? And I think it's available now, but where do they go? How do they get it? Yeah, it just came out, so it's available anywhere you get books. The best place to get it, though, is on my website, which is mike-robbins.com/book, because in addition to getting the book on that page, there's also a bunch of free downloads that you can get, some interviews I've done with some really interesting people, including a professor from University of Texas named Kristen Neff, who's actually like the world's leading expert in self-compassion. So I interviewed a bunch of experts and people, and we put a bunch of cool free stuff up on the site for people who order the book there. So it's mike-robbins.com/book. Cool. We'll make sure to put that in our blog and our email that goes out so they know exactly where to click. So thank you so much. And if there's any one last nugget of knowledge you'd like to share with people, what would it be? The one thing that if they watched all of this and were like, yeah, that's awesome, and this thing was going to do everything in their life for them, what would that magic be? Well, I think of some advice I got many years ago, Jairek, that it came in the form of parenting advice, but I think it's a really good just piece of life advice. A mentor of mine said to me when Michelle, my wife, was pregnant with Samantha, our now 8-year-old, it's our first, and I was nervous about being a father, and he said to me, Mike, the most important job you have with your daughter is to teach her how to love herself. And I said, really? How do I do that? And he said, you love yourself, and you let her see that. That's how you teach her how to love herself. So whether we're parents, whether we're in business, whether we're wanting to influence people, can we love and appreciate and accept ourselves? And when we do that, not only does it benefit us, but that's how we can have the biggest impact on the people around us. I love that. So be the reflection you wish to see in the world and do it through self-love and really connecting that deep peace. Exactly. Very, very cool. Well, thank you for joining us for this episode of JRC TV. Thank you to our amazing guest, Mike Robbins, my brother from another mother. And I hope you all grab a copy of his book. It's mike-robbins.com/book. Yes. So grab those free gifts, grab that book, get a copy for a friend, and I will see you next week. Until then, hope you have an amazing week. See you later.